We think women need to talk more openly about money because money really matters. It shouldn't be embarrassing or confusing. Join the conversation. We'll be discussing a whole range of topics which will help you get comfortable with your finances. Money Matters. Brought to you by AJ Bell.
Hello, welcome to the first AJ Bell Money Matters podcast for 2026. Happy New Year all. Happy New Year, Danni.
Happy New Year, Laura. And I'm delighted to say that it's not just the first pod of 2026, it is also, drum roll please, our 100th episode. So it's time for a double celebration. I can't believe it's the 100th episode.
I know, that feels like it's come round so quickly, but it's a long time since we launched this podcast, and I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in those 100 episodes as well.
I was looking back over the 100 episodes and realised, you're right, we've covered a huge amount of ground, but also I kind of forgotten that we go all the way back to 2021. So, that's a long time to have been doing these podcasts and launching this campaign. And we hope that it's gone some way to helping women feel a bit more comfortable about their finances, more able to talk about their finances, and maybe being inspired a little bit by some of the women we've spoken to over the years.
I'm going to put you on the spot now, Danni. I want you to pick a favourite episode. I'll let you pick a couple if you can't pin it down to just one, but what's been your favourite over those 100?
Do you know, I had to have a real think about this because we've had some amazing women on. I loved interviewing Julia Gillard, the former Prime Minister of Australia. We also had Lisa Snowdon talking about the menopause, and Arlene Phillips, formerly of Strictly Come Dancing fame. She demonstrated how to really smash through the glass ceiling. But for me, it was Eleanor Mills from Noon talking about queenagers, because I'd just become a queenager myself. And what I've noticed just in the last year or so since we actually spoke to her, that's been adopted by so many people. And the fact that women in their 50s have a huge amount of spending power, have a huge amount of, personal ability, experience, knowledge to share, and they weren't really being talked to by people that make stuff. So I think we've seen a big change there. So I have to say that was probably my favourite, just for the term queenager, which of course is Noon's phrase. But what about you? Do you have a favourite?
So I agree with you. I think, we've had some mega guests on this podcast. When you go back through the list of people that we've had some really, big names and some celebs, like you mentioned there. But actually, when I think about the one that stood out most to me, it's got the title of kind of loud budgeting and inspirational investing. But really on that, we spoke to a lovely lady called Trish Houston, and she talked about how investing had enabled her to make life choices that she wanted to make. Now, for her, that was being able to have IVF and become a solo parent. And I just think it's a really good example of bringing to life investing. So much of investing is talking about numbers, talking about, well, you should save for the future and you should be financially responsible. But actually, if you focus on a goal, then that makes it way more motivational. And I just really love those stories of this is what investing enabled me to do. And it's literally, in her case, life-changing what saving up that money and choosing to invest it rather than leave it in cash had enabled her to do. So I think that was like one of the most memorable to me in terms of what we're trying to achieve, but also just a very heartwarming, lovely story of how that had changed her life.
It really was a lovely story. I remember being just gobsmacked at the time at what she'd managed to achieve, and really, as you say, putting investing into a much more personal realm, something that's more tangible, because often, as you say, it's just about numbers and that can be really hard. If I can pick another one as well, just because I'm feeling greedy, I also liked, and I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was the one talking all about how your childhood shapes your money habits, and how if you're a saver or a spender, a lot of that dates back to childhood.
Yes, that one was so interesting. And I think there's sometimes interviews that you do where you think, oh, I think I need to ask myself some of these questions. Or you come away with a kind of action plan, and that was definitely one of them. But since it is a brand new year and the time when all of us think about starting good habits, things like making resolutions, trying not to break them, we thought we would make this episode all about how our financial lives have changed over the year or could change for the better over the next year. And not only give you some tips on how to set off on the right foot and hopefully stay on that right foot, but we've also gone back to some of our favourite podcast guests over the previous 99 episodes and asked them to share with us how their financial lives have changed since we last spoke to them.
But before we get to that, and we share their stories, share our stories, we've had a lovely message from Jane Gow from Clear Cut Chartered Accountants. Now, she gamely came on to answer all of your money questions in an episode from March 2024.
Danni and Laura, huge congratulations on reaching your 100th episode of Money Matters podcast. What a milestone. I've genuinely loved listening over the years. You've had some amazing guest speakers. It's one of those podcasts that makes money feel easy to understand, practical, and actually very interesting. It's made me feel even more passionate about helping women invest and look after their finances. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to hearing a lot more podcasts in the future.
I love that. And she was also really brilliant at answering all of our money questions. And we know that money is still frustratingly a bit of a taboo issue. But I hope we've tried to make it a little less confusing over the years by making sure we break down all of that jargon and try to help making big issues a bit more manageable, because a number of our podcast guests have said that getting financially fitter is genuinely like getting physically fitter. So if you jumped up and tried to go for a 10-mile run when you're just starting out running, you'd probably struggle, maybe, collapse. But if you start with a bit of a kind of starting out slow, maybe running and walking for a bit, doing it every few days, then it is much more manageable. And I think finances are exactly like that.
And another one of our previous podcast guests, Claire Tao, who was on our pod last February, along with her husband, Matt, she dropped us a message about how they've been changing their financial lives. And honestly, it really sums up what you've just said, Laura.
Hi, it's Claire here from Meet Margot. I would say in the last year, Matt and I as a couple have taken investing a lot more seriously. When we look back in March, AJ Bell's research about the gender wealth gap, that 1.65 trillion investment gap, it was a real eye-opener for me, especially being a woman. So for the rest of this year, I would say we've been a lot more intentional about investing regularly. Now, with that, there's months, especially in and around Christmas, where we haven't been able to set aside as much as we'd like into our investments, and that's okay. It's having the mindset that something really is better than nothing, even if it's a spare change from your vintage sales.
Yeah, I think it's about making those small changes, making those small steps. I think often when people, particularly at this time of year, think, oh, I need to look at my finances, I need to overhaul all of my finances, then that just becomes this huge task. So a good example of how kind of making small changes can really be beneficial.
And it was really funny when I heard Claire's message, because I have just sold a couple of things on Vinted, thanks to some of the tips that Eleanor shared with us on our recent Get Minted from Vinted pod. And I did put it into my newly opened stocks and shares ISA, which I found incredibly easy to open. And I have set up a direct debit. And I think so much of it is about taking the hassle out of it, making sure that you remember to do things every time out of it. So I have also been taking a real leaf out of some of the things that have been said on this podcast over the last year. And since we're sharing how our financial lives have changed, I have been looking just in the past couple of weeks for the best easy access savings rate. Now, in the past, I would have just shoved my spare cash into, possibly my current account, maybe just any old savings account, and I would not really have thought about interest. But since you've been talking about how much interest you can get for your money and how it can get completely eaten away by inflation, so effectively you're losing money, I have been seriously thinking about that because I've got to pay for some of the kids' university accommodation in installments over the next year. So I need it easy at hand. So I can't put it somewhere where it's going to be able to generate decent returns. It's just got to sit there. But I also don't want to lose money. So I've tried to be more intentional with my money. I've tried to be more careful, but I still got caught out once again by the same old thing that I seem to get caught out with every year, which is renewals. So I think I've managed to sort out my insurance renewals. I managed to, make sure that I spoke to somebody and got a better deal, didn't just let it sort of tick over. But I needed to get some new antivirus software for my daughter's laptop in September, or at least I thought I had to get some new antivirus software. I forgot I had already got a subscription with antivirus software from another company. I missed their renewal email. So now I've got 2 lots of antivirus software that I paid a chunky annual amount for. And I have made sure that I've now got a note on my calendar in my phone for September so that I will cancel one when that renewal date comes around, because that, I think, for me is where I get so caught up with just living that I suddenly find that for no reason other than perhaps laziness, I've lost 120 quid for no reason.
Which is always frustrating. So in my house, we have a phrase called the idiot tax, and we just allow everyone's going to make financial mistakes in a year. Everyone's going to make slip ups or, forget to cancel something. So my husband and I just say, it's the idiot tax, and you're kind of allowed, we've never actually really defined the amount of money, but you're allowed a certain number of slip ups a year because everyone's human and there's no point in beating yourself up because these things are going to happen. So I recently got caught in a yellow box that you're not on a road where you're not meant to be, and then I got a fine. And I was really annoyed, and my husband was like, it's just idiot tax, it's fine, and it just happens. So I think we can call your antivirus software idiot tax, and at least you put in a plan to fix it for next year.
I like that. I think I'm going to adopt that, the idiot tax. But unfortunately, I think that would be more than 1 or 2 examples of that over the course of my financial year.
Yeah,
so we'll move on.
Use it as just a get out of jail free card for everything, but it's just so you don't beat yourself up for every little error. Now, obviously, I will be sharing what's been going on in my financial life later, but let's hear from another of our previous podcast guests now. So Zoe Burt joined us on the podcast just a few months ago on an episode called Jargon-Free Economics. And since we spoke to her, she's had some big changes to deal with in her life.
Hi, my name is Zoe from Words on Wealth, and I loved being on the AJ Bell Money Matters podcast at the end of September. My finances have changed relatively significantly since, because I got married in mid-October. So I've been doing all sorts of admin, focusing on updating my will, changing some details around some accounts, although we did already have the likes of joint accounts and a joint mortgage, of course. But we've also been realigning our priorities now as we look to the future. Thanks for having me.
What I really like is this goes back to our survey that we did about financial wobbly bits, and the fact that younger generations do seem to be far more forward about having conversations about their finances ahead of getting married, having kids, those big life events. They're already discussing how the joint account will work, the mortgage will work, all of those kind of things. Whereas I'm showing my age, but then I've already admitted to being a queenager, so there we go. We didn't do that when I got married. It wasn't discussed. We kind of just plodded on and hoped for the best. And it was only much later, once the kids were getting towards school age, that we actually sat down and worked out how we were going to set up joint accounts and bills accounts and that kind of thing. But I think it's great that people are finding that they can have conversations with their partners.
Yeah, I think it's so much more encouraging for those younger generations, particularly, or, you know, whatever generation you're in, if you're having those conversations. And like you said in that research, one of the things that was highlighted was in lots of these big life changes or big life decisions, if you've discussed the financial implications of that with your partner beforehand, you're much more likely to come out on an equal footing. So we're thinking things like when you take maternity leave, or how you pay for childcare costs, or if you have a career break to care for a older family member, or if you move to part-time working. All of these things, if you have that discussion with your partner around the financial implications of that and planning around that, then it really can help to narrow that gender wealth gap, that gender investment gap. So I love it. Good bit of positivity.
I also like that she's really got to grips with a lot of the life admin. And I discovered not so very long ago that despite the fact that I've just celebrated my 21st wedding anniversary, and clearly I changed my name on quite a lot of stuff way back after I'd first got married, I hadn't changed my name with HMRC. So even though I had been paying my tax under my married name, when I went on to try and look and see where I stood in terms of my state pension and how much I'd paid in terms of national insurance, I couldn't log in. So, yeah, I had to sort some of that out. But, you know, making sure that you update those things like your will, if you have had life changes, things like life insurance policies, you know, it's just like making sure that if you move house, you change the key that you're going to use to enter the house. You've got to just keep up with it. And hopefully all of you have been getting to grips with your finances because you've been listening to this pod, you've been getting our newsletter and reading some of the brilliant articles on the website. But getting them in order, investing little and often, like Claire and Matt have been doing this past year, it really can make a world of difference when you're going through some of those big life changes that we were just hearing about from Zoe there. Let's hear what another of our brilliant podcast guests had to say.
Hello, my name is Laura Ann Moore. I'm a qualified financial coach, educator, and speaker. Thank you so much for having me on this special episode. Honestly, it's always such a pleasure to be a guest on the podcast. Now, since my last episode, for me, my finances have changed quite dramatically, whereby in the last 12 months, I've gone through a very big life shift and some big life changes. And I feel super grateful that I have such a strong money mindset because it has allowed me to use my money as a tool, and my finances have been there to support me through this period, and that has been amazing. And my relationship to money and to spending has completely shifted, and this year hasn't been about growth financially, it's been about personal growth, and my money has been there to support me for that. So yeah.
So that was Laura Ann Moore from Mind, Money and Soul. She was on our brilliantly titled Attitudes to Risk and Taylor Swift's Inflation Impact from July 2024.
I love when we can get Taylor Swift involved in my job. It's always a win, isn't it?
And no surprise that was a really well sought after episode, because I think anything that is connected to Taylor Swift just grabs people's attention, doesn't it? I mean, she's been absolutely tremendous and really flying the flag, I think, for smart and powerful women, which is something, of course, that we want to do here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I talked at the start about one of the podcast episodes talking about how investing can give you options and give you choices. And I think, you know, Laura's talking about a similar thing there. It's about having savings, having the financial resilience to be able to support you in what you want to do in life. So that is a good example of things like how having an emergency savings cushion can help, having that financial resilience and getting your finances in order can help you make choices in life.
And paying off debt as well. That's something I know that we've done a couple of podcast episodes about. And, you know, clearly, if you've got debt with a very high interest rate, then it makes sense to deal with that rather than socking cash away on a very low interest rate. You know, think about the sums and it just doesn't add up sometimes.
And that is something that one of our very first podcast guests, Rachel Peru, from an episode called Getting Sassy with Your Pension Planning from way back in November 2021, Danni. She knows all about this.
Gosh, so much has happened since I last spoke to Danni on the podcast. But I did really listen to what Danni was talking about, and I've taken control of my finances. So I have, what have I done since then? We have sold our house, downsized, managed to pay the mortgage off, which feels really good this year. That's been a big thing to do. I'm really concentrated on paying any debts off, just so that we can live a life that's got more freedom.
Now, I've been keeping up with Rachel since we did that episode, and she's gone on to have a really successful career as a silver curve model. So really flying the flag for Queen Aegis. I'm using this term again, Eleanor Noon. And she's also been working with the brilliant Jacinth from Ageism is Never in Style, another great pod episode. And she's modelled swimwear for the likes of Davina McCall and Ashley Graham. And she's also taken some of the cash that she's managed to free up from downsizing to invest in starting up her own swimwear line.
I love this. I just love stories not only of female success, but of kind of that financial independence, that, you know, using money wisely and then investing in yourself is, I think that's a great positive story, isn't it?
It is, and our next financial update will probably strike a chord with you, Laura. Georgina Taylor from Invesco was on an episode in February 2025 called Saving for Retirement and Taking Pension Payouts. And her confession, because we love a confession, was that despite being a fund manager herself, she'd not really invested her own money like she felt she should.
I have two updates since being on the Money Matters podcast. So firstly, I talked about high cash levels. I've always been an investor, but I was holding on to a bit of cash just as that comfort blanket, but I have reduced them. I have invested a little bit more, so I'm very proud of myself. And secondly, I've done two things for my son. He is 10 years old. I want him to be investing. So I have increased contributions to his ISA, but also got him an online digital banking app so that he can also see the benefits of saving and where he allocates that money to.
You know, I think her story really sums up a lot of people, and particularly women out there, of just a tendency towards cash savings and thinking, oh, that's on my to-do list, I'll get it sorted, and, you know, not getting around to it. So it's great that she's made those steps, you know, boosting her son's ISA, helping to engage with him on, you know, improving his knowledge of finances and, you know, reducing her cash levels. So I think that is a really good thing to hear. And it's just so important. We know that so many people out there, again, particularly women, have too much money in cash, in that they are hoarding cash, more cash than they need. So cash is really good for that emergency savings pot, for any short-term spending needs, or any money you really, really don't want to take any risk with. But beyond that, it's a really good idea to think about investing or to consider investing. So that is a good task for anyone who's looking for a financial resolution out there. A good one would be to, if you've got decent amount of savings, add together what you've got in cash savings, what you really think you need for a short term, and whether you could think about investing some of the rest of it, because we know that that is a thing that can really harm people's, and particularly women's, future financial wealth.
And I know lots of people have been putting by considerable amounts of their income. We had an update just a couple of weeks ago about GDP, which that's jargon. So gross domestic product, which even when you say it like that, sounds like more jargon.
Still jargon.
Yes, it is. But effectively, it's taking the temperature of the economy. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? And it was looking at household savings rate, and it has come down a little bit, but it's still historically high. 9.5% is how much an average household's putting by in terms of their income into savings at the moment. So, I mean, that's still a huge amount because there's so much uncertainty around. Now, I stress, of course, that is average. And we know lots of people are not able to save anywhere near that amount of cash. But it is something that lots of people are having conversations about, particularly as unemployment rises.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's something that we'll hear a bit more about this year. We know that the government is trying to encourage more people to invest, and it will be interesting to see what comes out of the government and various other people in terms of that, and whether investing becomes this kind of more hot topic, more chat in the pub. Obviously, it's chat in the pub when I'm there because it's all I talk about. But
I bet people flock to you, Laura. It's like, I'll buy you a drink if you come and talk to me about investing in stocks and shares ISAs.
it's weird. I literally had that conversation in the pub yesterday with my friend saying, I've got savings in cash and I don't know what to do with it. Please tell me what to do with it. And I was like, I cannot give you advice and I don't want the responsibility of dealing with your finances. She basically just wanted to hand me over her passwords and let me have at it. But I was like, I can put together a plan that you can carry out yourself that doesn't require me to have your banking login details. So that is one of my tasks for this year, is to help her out.
And in the meantime, take a listen to this podcast because you'll find loads of tips if you go back all the episodes that we've done, 100 episodes that we've done.
Exactly. And obviously, I'm not perfect. So I had things to deal with in my finances this year. One of them was the fact that I was a little sporadic with my saving for my daughter. So I've automated that now so that there's money going into her ISA and I don't have to think about it. And to your point earlier, Danny, I think just like automating the process means that you can tick it off your to-do list and it's done and you just check in with it every now and then, but it's not something that you actively have to do every month. So I found that really helpful. Our focus also, we moved house 18 months ago and got a much larger mortgage. So our focus has been on saving some money so that mortgage is not quite so large. So we're coming up to renew our mortgage this summer. So that's been one of our big focuses, is kind of, been our kind of short-term goal and saving some money for that. But I'm going to break from type here, Danny. One of my goals for this year is to have more fun with money. I'm not going to say I'm going to go full reckless, Danny, but I do think that you can have all of these sensible financial plans in place and you can save for things, but actually it's also good to enjoy money and spend some money in your life. I think I've definitely could be accused of being slightly recklessly cautious, maybe. So I turned 40 this year. I also know that my daughter isn't going to be young and want to hang out with us forever. So one of my goals for this year is to spend a bit more money on, experiences, using the money that me and my husband work very hard for to have fun with it too. So I'm aware this is very off-brand and not very me, but I think it is important to, you can have all the sensible plans, you can save the money, but it's also important to enjoy it and have some fun with it. Now, if I come back at the end of this year and I'm broke, please tell me I've gone too far.
But you say that, this is not like you, but you are the queen of holidays.
That is true. That is true. And obviously there will be many holidays featured in this year, standard. But I think it's about allowing yourself to splurge a bit more when you want to.
I think I have too much fun with money. But I can't have any fun with money while my kids are at university because they take all of my money. In fact, the eldest has just said, Mum, is there any chance I can come to the bank of Mum and Dad for a bit of a loan before I go back to university and get my university money? And there we go. Yeah.
And I guess very on trend, talking about kids and finances, our last special guest with an update today is Kalpana Fitzpatrick, who joined us in August 2024 to talk about how to teach kids about money. And she's written lots of books on the subject. She's also the host of the Money Week podcast, which is well worth checking out, but only after you've listened to this podcast. This one first, then you can go and check that one out. But here's what she's been up to with her finances.
Hello, so you asked me how my finances have changed in the last year. Well, I've become a little bit poorer. But that said, it's all good. I did actually use a lot of my investments towards a kitchen renovation, so it's all good. It does, however, show that having clear goals and an investment strategy to help you get there can really help you achieve your goals a lot faster. So I'm going into 2026 investing a little bit more again.
See, this is just exactly what you were talking about having more fun with money, because money and, being financially resilient and being financially fit, it can seem complicated, it can seem boring, but it should also make life a bit better. It should be used to fund some of the good stuff, holidays, having fun, kitchens, houses, all that life stuff. It should be about that.
Exactly. It's about giving yourself future options. I always think about this in terms of pension saving. So if you start saying to people, oh, you should save your pension, they're like, yeah, I know, boring, it's so far away. I mean, not everyone will say that, but some people might. But actually, if you reframe it as you should save into your pension so you can have a fabulous life when you've retired, or so you can have many holidays a year, or so you can go and have that trip with your friends, or so you can order the nice food at the restaurant. I think it's all about framing it not in, oh, you should save money and put away money in an account. It's what's the future life that you want to afford, and how can you save for that and give yourself those options. So yes, a great example of that, I would say, Danni.
And I think the conversation is changing. I mean, hopefully we've changed it a little bit through this podcast. We've tried to make it useful and inspiring. I mean, that was the reason that we started it back in 2021, to try and help everyone feel good about their financial lives, to help deliver some of the tools so that you know the kind of questions to ask and where to find the answers to those questions. And we hope that we're going to cover an awful lot more of that over the next 100 episodes. So do keep listening.
For sure. We've got some fab guests lined up already, from how to start good money habits and not quit them to how to avoid lifestyle creep, which we've spoken about before, but definitely bears repeating. We're also going to change the format of the podcast a little bit. So we're going to tackle just one topic an episode, make it a bit shorter because we know you all have busy lives, a bit more digestible. But let us know what you think of that new format. You can email us at hello@ajbellmoneymatters.co.uk. Or you can get in touch via our socials. We're at AJ Bell Money Matters on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
And do let us know if there is a topic that you would like us to cover, or maybe someone you'd like us to talk to. There are some fantastic women out there who are making, big splash in the world of finance. And what I do like is that it is being talked about so much more. And I think the cost of living crisis had a little bit to do with that, because it stopped being quite as taboo to talk about money. And in fact, most of the mums' nights I've had recently have ended up with a discussion somewhere along the line about money. But thanks so much for listening to our 100th episode. If you've not listened to all of the 100 episodes available, do take a look back, because lots of the material is still as relevant today as it was when we recorded it.
And until next time, thank you for listening.
Before you go, please remember this podcast is for educational purposes, and the views expressed don't necessarily reflect those of AJ Bell. The podcast isn't telling you if a certain investment is suitable or not. Don't forget that the value of investments can change, and you can lose money as well as make it. It's also important to remember that how you're taxed will depend on your individual circumstances, and rules can change. The way an investment performed in the past may not be the same as how it behaves in the future. If you want help, go see a qualified financial advisor.